Welcome to Monk's Temple. Tonight, as you settle into your rest, let us begin not with a journey outward, but with a gentle turning inward. Feel the weight of your body being held by the surface beneath you. Notice the quiet rhythm of your breath, flowing in and out without any need for your direction. In this space, there is nowhere to go, nothing to achieve. The Buddha taught that peace is not a destination, but a quality of awareness we can uncover right here. So let us start by simply being here, together, in this shared silence. There is a question that has followed me since childhood, one that arose not from a book, but from watching my grandmother in her garden. She would spend hours tending her roses, her hands moving with a slow, deliberate care. One afternoon, as I sat on the grass, I asked her, "Grandma, why do you talk to the plants?" She didn't look up from the soil cradled in her palm. "I'm not talking to them, my dear," she said softly. "I'm listening. And when I listen, I remember that I am not separate from this earth. The rose's thorn and my own skin are made of the same weighting elements." In her simple words was an entire universe of Buddhist teaching, the truth of interbeing, the end of separation. We often believe we are the gardeners of our lives, controlling, pruning, directing. But what if we are also the garden? What if our true practice is to listen, to feel that fundamental unity, and in doing so, to find a rest that needs no reason? This leads us to a core principle that the Buddha illuminated: our suffering often stems from a case of mistaken identity. We believe we are the voice in the head, the narrator of our story, with all its hopes, regrets, and constant commentary. Buddhism gently corrects this. You are not the voice. You are the vast, silent room in which the voice speaks. Thoughts come and go like weather in the sky, but the sky itself remains unchanged, unstained, infinitely spacious. Your essence is that sky, aware, open, and inherently peaceful. Clinging to the weather as if it were you is what creates the storm of suffering. Letting go into the sky is the beginning of freedom. Let me share with you an original story, a parable about this very discovery. In a village known for its exquisite tapestries, there lived a weaver named Ilara. Her tapestries were so detailed, so vivid, that people said you could walk into their scenes. Ilara, however, was deeply unhappy. She felt trapped inside her own loom, tangled in threads of constant thought, judging every color, fearing every mistake, comparing her work to others. Her mind was a crowded, noisy room. One day, a traveling monk with quiet eyes visited her stall. He gazed at a tapestry showing a forest. "The trees are remarkable," he said. "But tell me, where is the space between the branches?" Ilara, confused, said, "That's just the background. The empty part." The monk smiled. "Is it empty? Or is it what holds the tree together? Without that space, there is no tree, only a solid block of thread." He invited her to a simple practice, to spend minutes each day not looking at the threads of her thoughts, but at the space around and within them. Reluctantly, she tried. As she sat, her mind buzzed with its usual patterns. But she gently redirected her attention to the pauses between thoughts, to the silence underneath the noise. At first, it felt like nothing. Then, slowly, she began to sense it, a profound, peaceful emptiness that was not dead, but alive and intelligent. It felt more like her true self than the frantic weaver ever had. Over time, she returned to her loom. But now, she wove from that silence. The tapestries she created afterward were different. They had a luminous quality, a depth that seemed to contain not just images, but the very peace from which they were born. Villagers would stand before them and feel their own anxieties soften. Ilara had discovered the Buddha's path. We shift our identity from the content of experience, the woven thread, to the context, the aware space that allows all things to be. The room, not the voice. The sky, not the cloud. If this way of seeing, this gentle unraveling, speaks to you, I warmly invite you to subscribe to Monk's Temple. Your subscription is a soft bell of encouragement, a way to tend this shared garden of understanding. It allows us to continue weaving these stories of peace for you, creating a regular sanctuary in your listening. Now, let's continue. We often approach our minds as if they are problems to be solved. We hear of meditation and think it is a tool to fix our chaos, to achieve a state of perfect calm. But Buddhism offers a different view. What if the mind, in its natural state, is not broken? What if the very attempt to fix it is the source of the friction? Think of a clear mountain lake. The wind blows, and the surface churns with waves. You could spend all day trying to smooth the water with your hands, fighting each ripple. This is our typical state, constant mental doing. The teachings invite you to stop smoothing. Instead, dive below the surface. Just a few feet down, beneath the wind's influence, the water is still, clear, and tranquil. This depth is always present. Your practice is not to create stillness at the turbulent surface, but to remember the depth that already exists and to rest your awareness there. From that depth, you can watch the surface waves, your thoughts and emotions, with compassion, knowing they do not disturb your essential nature. This understanding brings us to another original tale. There was once a renowned clockmaker named Silas who lived in a city obsessed with measuring time. His shop was a chorus of ticks and tocks, a symphony of urgency. Silas believed that precision and control were the highest virtues, and he applied this to his own life, scheduling every minute, fighting against any delay or imperfection. He was perpetually exhausted, a prisoner of the very timepieces he built. One evening, a frail old woman entered his shop and placed a strange device on his counter. It was a simple hourglass, but the sand inside was not falling. It was suspended, a frozen stream of gold. "This is broken," Silas said. "I can fix it." The woman shook her head. "It is not broken. It is waiting. It measures only the moment you stop trying to measure." She left before he could reply. Intrigued and frustrated, Silas took the hourglass to his workshop. He tried everything. Shaking it, tilting it, even attempting to replace the sand. Nothing worked. The sand hung in perfect, silent suspension. Days passed. His obsession with fixing it began to crowd out his other work. Finally, in a state of utter defeat, he put his head in his hands and simply stared at the unmoving sand. As he gazed, his frantic thinking began to slow. The noisy ticks of his clocks faded into a distant, uniform hum. He found himself resting in a profound quiet he had never known. In that quiet, he wasn't a clockmaker behind on his work, he was simply awareness, witnessing a beautiful, golden stillness. He stayed that way for a long time. When he finally looked up, he noticed something. A single grain of sand had fallen. Then another. Time was moving again, but he was no longer fighting it. He had touched the timeless within time. From that day, Silas still made clocks, but he was no longer made by them. He worked from the silent center he had found, and his creations began to embody not just precision, but a mysterious peace. He learned what the Buddha taught: liberation is not found in controlling the flow of moments, but in discovering the timeless awareness that perceives the flow. Let's pause here, and allow these first insights to settle. In the next part, we will explore the nature of fear and the heart's incredible capacity to hold all things. Let us continue this gentle exploration together. In the quiet we are cultivating, we may begin to notice other visitors, subtle feelings of unease, old worries, a background hum of anxiety. This, too, is part of the path. Buddhism does not ask us to eliminate fear, but to understand its roots with great compassion. Fear is not your enemy. It is an ancient signal, a ripple in the water pointing to a forgotten truth, the belief that you are a separate, fragile self in a threatening world. When we meet fear with resistance, it tightens its grip. When we meet it with the openness of the sky, it is revealed to be just another passing cloud. I remember a time, many years ago, walking through a dense forest at dusk. The path faded, and darkness gathered quickly. A primal, wordless fear arose, a tightening in the chest, a quickening of the pulse. The mind instantly spun stories of being lost, of wild animals, of danger. The instinct was to run, to panic. But remembering a simple teaching, I stopped. I placed a hand on the rough bark of a tree and took one deep breath. I let the fear be there, a physical sensation, without following the frantic stories about it. I whispered to it, "It's okay. You can be here." I did not try to be brave. I simply offered permission for the fear to exist. And in that allowance, something shifted. The tight fist in my chest began to soften. The fear did not vanish, but it lost its personal, overwhelming quality. It became part of the forest's own mystery, the rustling leaves, the deepening shadows, the vast unknown. I was no longer a separate me afraid of the forest. I was the forest experiencing itself, aware and alive. This is the practice of metta, loving kindness, applied to the most vulnerable parts of ourselves. We offer sanctuary to our own fear, and in that sanctuary, it transforms from a monster into a messenger, pointing us back to our innate wholeness. Let's explore this with a new story. In a coastal village, there was a woman named Mara who was renowned for her skill in crafting fishing nets. Her nets were strong, reliable, and brought security to the entire village. But Mara herself was captive to a net of her own making, a web of constant worry. She worried about the weather, the catch, her family's health, the future. Her mind was a loom of disaster scenarios. One season, the fish inexplicably moved far out to sea. The villagers grew anxious, but Mara's worry became a torment. She couldn't sleep, her hands trembled, and she could no longer weave. Desperate, she went to the cliffs where an old hermit was said to live. She found him sitting, gazing at the horizon. "My mind is a net of fears," she confessed. "It traps me, and I cannot breathe." The hermit pointed to the ocean. "You know nets," he said. "What happens to a net when you pull against the knots?" "It tightens," she said. "Exactly," he replied. "Now, what happens if you place the net in the water and simply watch it? You see the water flow through. You see the light catch the strands. The net is still a net, but it is no longer a trap. It is part of the sea." He invited her to sit with him and do nothing but watch her own thoughts as if they were that net in the water, not pulling against them, not trying to fix them, just observing the space within and around each knot of worry. Mara began this practice. At first, the net of her thoughts felt impenetrable. But as she practiced non-resistance, she began to sense the water, a flowing, spacious awareness that her thoughts moved through. A knot of fear about money would arise, and instead of tugging on it, she'd feel the sorrow underneath. A strand of anxiety about her son would appear, and she'd sense the boundless love it was tangled with. She wasn't mending the net, she was remembering the ocean. Slowly, her inner turmoil settled. She returned to her weaving, but now her nets had a new quality, flexible, resilient, woven with a calm intention. The villagers remarked that nets made by Mara's peaceful hands seemed to bring a more abundant catch. She had learned the Buddha's lesson: our struggle against fear creates suffering. Our gentle, spacious awareness of fear reveals its empty, impermanent nature and allows wisdom to arise. This brings us to another profound principle: the heart's natural capacity. In Buddhism, the heart, *siddha*, is not merely the seat of passing emotions. It is the unified field of feeling and knowing. When it is not constricted by the illusion of separation, its innate quality is karuna, compassion. This compassion is not a moral obligation or a sentimental feeling. It is the natural resonance of an open heart, like one string on a violin humming when another is plucked. You do not need to manufacture it. You simply need to remove the barriers to it. The walls of judgment, self-concern, and fear. To illustrate, here is another original tale. In a valley between two warring towns, there was a single, ancient bell that hung from a stone arch. It was said the bell had not been rung in 100 years, since the fighting began, for its sound was so pure it would remind people of their shared humanity. A young man named Kaido from the eastern town, orphaned by the conflict, was taught to hate the West. His heart was a fortress. One night, tasked with a patrol near the arch, he found an old woman from the western town sitting beneath the bell, weeping for her own lost son. Hatred surged in him. But as he watched her, something cracked. He saw not an enemy, but a mirror of his own grief. Without thinking, he reached out and touched the cold metal of the bell. A single, deep note rang out, clear and soft in the night air. The sound did something strange. It didn't erase their pain or their history. Instead, it seemed to hold it all in a vast, vibrating space. In that moment, Kaido's fortified heart broke open. Not into pieces, but into openness. He saw the woman's grief as his own, not because their stories were the same, but because the feeling of loss arose from the same universal source. He sat beside her, and they wept together under the moon. The bell's note had been a metaphor for the Buddha's teaching on shunyata, or emptiness. The understanding that all things are interdependent and lack a separate, solid self. The sound wasn't east or west. It was a resonance that connected everything. Kaido's compassion arose not because he was good, but because the bell of his own awareness had been struck by the reality of shared suffering, and it rang true. Let's pause here, allowing the resonance of these teachings to settle within. In the next part, we will delve into the art of letting go and the profound freedom found not in adding, but in subtracting. As we settle deeper into this shared space, let's explore one of the most liberating, yet often misunderstood, invitations of the Buddha's path, the art of letting go. We often hear this phrase and imagine it as an act of loss, of giving something precious away, of creating an emptiness that might feel cold. But in the deeper wisdom of Buddhism, letting go is not an act of loss at all. It is an act of homecoming. It is the unclenching of a hand you did not realize was tightly closed, allowing you to finally feel the open air against your palm. What are we letting go of? Not life, not experience, not love. We are letting go of our grasping at these things, our desperate, fixed ideas about how they should be in order for us to be happy. Think of it this way. You are floating on your back in a calm sea. The water is warm, the sky is vast. You are completely supported. But you have become convinced you must hold on to a large, heavy rock to stay safe. Your arms ache, your body is tense, you are sinking from the effort. Letting go is simply opening your hands and allowing the rock to fall. The support was always there, in the water itself. The rock was only ever an idea, the idea that you were unsupported and needed to cling to something solid. The Buddhist teaching on upadana, or clinging, shows us that we suffer not because of the changing nature of life, but because we demand that it be otherwise. We cling to pleasure, we push away pain, and we ignore the neutral, all in a frantic effort to control the uncontrollable. Letting go is the courageous and gentle decision to float. I witnessed a simple, profound example of this in my own family. My uncle was a collector of beautiful, rare stones. His study was filled with shelves of them, each labeled, each admired. He derived great pride and identity from this collection. Then, a flood damaged his home. The water receded to reveal his cherished stones covered in silt, their labels washed away, many cracked or lost in the mud. I found him sitting amidst the mess, not with despair, but with a strange, quiet smile. He picked up a mud-caked geode, wiped it with his thumb, and said, "For 40 years, I owned these stones. Now, I see they were never mine. They belonged to the river, to the earth. I was just their temporary guardian." In that moment of non-clinging, he wasn't poorer. He was freer. He had lost the collection but found a truth that couldn't be washed away, the peace of non-ownership. He began giving the stones away to children in the neighborhood, delighting in their wonder. His joy was no longer contingent on possession. This is the essence of the Buddhist teaching on renunciation. Not a grim austerity, but the joyful lightness that comes when we stop burdening ourselves with the weight of mine. Let's unfold this with an original story. In a city of towering spires, there lived a master architect named Korin. His life's work, his identity, was the Central Archive, a building designed to preserve everything, every record, every artifact, every memory of the city. It was a monument to holding on. The archive was a labyrinth of vaults and shelves, a physical manifestation of a clinging mind. Korin himself lived in a small, austere apartment within it, surrounded by blueprints of things yet to be built and catalogs of things saved. He was respected, but he was also a prisoner of his own masterpiece, fearful of decay, loss, and the inevitable passage of time. One day, a fire broke out in a lower chamber. Though it was contained, the smoke permeated the entire archive. Precious scrolls were unharmed but carried the scent of ash forever. Korin was devastated. The perfect preservation he had sought was impossible. He fell into a deep silence. For weeks, he did not design or catalog. He simply walked through the smoky halls. Then, he began to notice something. The scent of ash, mingled with the old smell of parchment and stone, was not unpleasant. It told a story of survival, of impermanence, of reality. He noticed how the morning light, filtered through the now slightly soot glass dome, created beams of breathtaking beauty, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. He saw that the archive was not a fortress against time, but a participant in it. In a radical move, he ordered the great doors of the archive opened to the public. He stopped trying to preserve things in sterile stillness. Instead, he let children run in the halls, let scholars handle the documents, let the city's life flow into the building. He created a garden in the central courtyard where plants would grow, bloom, and die. The archive was no longer a tomb for memory, it became a living lung for the city, a testament to the beauty of the cycle, not the tyranny of the permanent. Corin, in letting go of his rigid idea of preservation, found a deeper, more vibrant form of care. He had embodied the Buddha's core insight into anicca, impermanence. By ceasing to fight it, he found harmony with it, and in that harmony, a profound and creative peace. This leads us to a related and vital understanding: letting go is often an internal process that manifests as external simplicity. We clutter our minds with opinions, judgments, and ceaseless commentary. The practice of meditation, at its heart, is a gentle practice of letting go of thought, not by force, but by noticing and releasing, again and again. Imagine your awareness is a vast, clear lake. Each thought is a leaf falling onto the surface. If you try to push the leaves away, you create more ripples. If you grab at them, you disturb the water. Letting go is simply watching the leaf float, appreciating its color and shape, and allowing the natural current of your attention to carry it gently to the shore. You don't own the leaf. You are the lake, capable of reflecting it without being defined by it. Let's rest with this image for now. In the next part, we will explore how this spirit of letting go and open awareness meets our daily life, transforming ordinary moments into doorways of the sacred. Now, let us bring this awareness, this spirit of openness and release, into the very fabric of our daily life. For the wisdom of the Buddha is not a mountaintop experience to be visited only in silence, it is a path to be walked in the marketplace, the kitchen, the place where you work. The profound shift is not in changing what we do, but in changing how we meet it. The sacred is not separate from the ordinary, it is the ordinary, perceived with fully awake attention. When we stop dividing our experience into spiritual and mundane, every action becomes a potential meditation, a gesture of peace. Consider the simple act of washing a cup. Usually, we wash the cup to get to the next thing, to have a clean cup, to finish the chore. Our mind is already ahead, planning the next task, or behind, reviewing the last. The cup itself is barely seen, the feeling of warm water and smooth porcelain is barely felt. We are absent from our own life. But what if washing the cup was the entire universe in that moment? What if you felt the weight of the cup, the temperature of the water as a direct sensation, the movement of your own hand, the play of light on the soap bubbles? There is no past, no future. There is only cup, water, hand, awareness. In that total presence, a simple chore becomes a ceremony. This is what the great Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh called mindfulness. It is not an extra activity, it is the art of coming home to the life you are actually living. I learned this not from a book, but from a neighbor many years ago. Mr. Jacobs was a retired shoemaker. Every morning, without fail, I would see him through his kitchen window, making his breakfast with a slow, deliberate care. He would toast one slice of bread, watching it in the old oven until it was just golden. He would butter it evenly to the very edges. He would slice a strawberry, if it was summer, and place the pieces in a precise, joyful pattern on the plate. It took him 20 minutes. To my rushing teenage mind, it seemed an absurd waste of time. One day, I asked him why he didn't just get it done faster. He looked at me, his eyes clear and kind. "Young man," he said, "if I rush through this to get to the important part of my day, I will rush through the important part to get to the next. I will rush until I reach my grave, having never actually been alive." This, he said, holding up his butter knife, this asterisk is the important part. In his simple ritual was the essence of the Buddha's teaching on samasati, right mindfulness. He was not making breakfast, he was practicing intimacy with life itself. Let's explore this transformation of the ordinary through an original story. There was a woman named Anya who worked as a proofreader in a bustling news office. Her world was one of tiny black marks on white paper, of deadlines and corrections, of finding flaws. She carried this lens into her life, proofreading conversations for errors, her own actions for imperfections. She lived in a state of low-grade anxiety, a constant mental scribble in the margins of her experience. Her life felt small, dry, and profoundly tedious. One rainy autumn, her train home was delayed. Stuck on the platform, frustrated and mentally editing her awful day, she noticed an elderly man sitting on a bench, utterly absorbed in watching the rain fall into a puddle. He wasn't reading, wasn't on a phone. He was just watching. His face held a look of serene fascination. Curiosity cut through Anya's irritation. She sat nearby and tried to see what he saw. At first, she just saw a wet, dirty puddle. But as she kept looking, she began to see the intricate dance of each raindrop, the perfect circle it made, how circles overlapped and dissolved, how the streetlights reflected in the shifting water, creating a liquid kaleidoscope of gold and gray. Time stretched and softened. Her inner critic fell silent. For 10 minutes, she was not a proofreader. She was pure, childlike perception. When her train finally arrived, she felt strangely refreshed. The next day at work, she tried an experiment. Instead of just hunting for mistakes in the text, she first allowed herself to feel the texture of the paper, to see the elegant shapes of the letters, to appreciate the miracle of language conveying meaning. Then, she did her job. The shift was subtle but revolutionary. The work was no longer a tedious hunt for the wrong. It became a curious engagement with form and meaning. She began to apply this puddle gaze elsewhere, to the taste of her morning tea, to the sound of her colleagues' laughter, to the weight of her own footsteps. Her life did not change outwardly, but it was utterly transformed inwardly. The tedious had become textured. The ordinary had become extraordinary. She discovered what the Buddha taught, nirvana is not somewhere else. It is here, in the perfection of seeing clearly what is right before you, by ceasing to proofread her reality for flaws, she began to read it as the profound, mysterious story it is. This practice of deep presence is the gateway to true contentment, or santuthi in the Buddha's teachings. Contentment is not passive resignation. It is the active, joyful recognition of the sufficiency of this very moment. It is the end of the exhausting mental bargaining, I'll be happy when. When the mind stops scrambling toward a different moment, it discovers an abundance that was always here. The sound of rain is enough. The warmth of this blanket is enough. This single breath is enough. In this enoughness, we find a rest that the world cannot give and cannot take away. Let's pause and allow this sense of sufficiency to be felt. In the next part, we will turn toward a tender and powerful aspect of the path, forgiveness and the healing of the heart. Now, let us turn gently toward a place within that often holds the deepest knots of clinging and suffering, the heart that has been wounded. In the quiet space we've cultivated, old hurts, regrets, and resentments may surface. They are not intruders. They are parts of our experience that have been waiting for the light of kind attention. The Buddhist path offers a profound and healing practice here, forgiveness. But it is crucial to understand this not as a moral commandment or an act of condoning harm. It is, rather, a strategic and compassionate release of a poison you have been carrying, often for a very long time. As the Buddha taught, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal to throw at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Forgiveness is the act of dropping the coal. It is medicine for the holder, first and foremost. This forgiveness begins with oneself. So often, our deepest resentment is directed inward, for mistakes made, for opportunities missed, for not being who we thought we should be. We hold a silent, relentless court in our minds, judging our past selves with a harshness we would never show another. I recall a period in my own life after a significant failure. For months, my mind was a loop of replay, each time hoping the ending would change. If only I had, why didn't I? It was a form of self-imprisonment. The shift came not through self-praise, but through a simple question posed by a teacher: who is suffering right now? I saw it was the present me, clinging to a ghost of the past me. The teacher then asked, can you offer that past version of yourself the same compassion you would offer a dear friend who had stumbled? That question broke the spell. I saw my past self not as a fool, but as a person doing their best with the understanding they had at the time, overwhelmed by fear and hope. I whispered inwardly, it's okay. You were learning. In that moment, the knot of self-resentment loosened. The past didn't change, but my relationship to it did. This is the essence of the Buddha's teaching on self-compassion. It is the foundation for freeing the heart. Let's explore this through an original story. In a town built on a slow, winding river, there was a renowned boatman named Elias. He could navigate any rapid, read any current. But Elias carried a secret weight. Years before, in a moment of youthful rivalry, he had tricked his closest friend, Leo, during a boat race, causing Leo to capsize and lose not just the race, but a treasured family pendant from his father. Leo, humiliated and heartbroken, left town. Elias won the race, but lost his friend and his peace. The memory was a stone in his chest. He became the best boatman on the river, as if to prove something, but his eyes were hard, and his joy was gone. One summer, during a terrible flood, Elias was called to rescue people stranded on rooftops. As he maneuvered his boat through the raging torrent, he saw a man clinging to a tree. It was Leo, older, weary, having returned to visit his mother. Their eyes met over the churning water. All the old shame and guilt surged in Elias. But the immediate need was clear. He fought the current, pulled Leo into the boat. They sat in soaked silence as Elias rowed them to safety. Back on solid ground, trembling, Elias could no longer hold it. He turned to Leo and said the words that had been trapped for a decade: I was wrong. I am so sorry. For the race. For the pendant. For everything. Leo looked at him, water streaming from his hair. He was quiet for a long moment, listening to the storm subside. Then he said, "I carried my anger for that pendant like an anchor. It kept me from moving on. Seeing you risk this boat today. The river has taken enough from both of us." He didn't say, "I forgive you." Instead, he put a hand on the wet gunwale of the rescue boat. "This is the only boat we have now." In that moment, Elias felt the stone in his chest not vanish, but transform. It became just a memory, no longer feeding a story of him being a bad person. It was a chapter in a long life, now closed. The forgiveness was in the shared reality of the flood, the shared survival, the mutual release of the old story so they could tend to the present. Elias learned that forgiveness in the Buddhist sense is often less about a grand pronouncement and more about the quiet, mutual understanding of shared suffering and impermanence. The flood washed away the old ground, and they chose not to rebuild the prison. This story points to the interdependence of all things, a core Buddhist truth called praditya samutpada. Our lives are a web. Hurt happens at the intersections. Healing, too, must acknowledge the web. Forgiving another is seeing that their harmful action arose from a tangled knot of their own ignorance, pain, and conditioning, just as your reaction did. It doesn't excuse the action, but it places it in the flow of cause and effect, rather than freezing it as a monument to your victimhood. This perspective doesn't always lead to reconciliation, but it always leads to a liberation of your own heart from the rigid identity of the one who was wronged. The practice here is a gentle one. When a memory of hurt arises, feel it in the body. Locate the sensation, the tightness, the heat, the ache. Breathe into that space. Offer it the phrase, "This is suffering." Then, broaden the awareness, this suffering, born of past causes, is present now. May I hold this suffering with kindness. You are not condoning the past event, you are offering mercy to the present experience of pain that lives in you. You are dropping the hot coal. Let's allow the heart to rest in this understanding. In the next part, we will explore how this open, forgiving heart meets the world, the natural flowering of compassion and connection. As the heart unclenches through understanding and forgiveness, something beautiful and natural begins to occur. It is not something we need to force or manufacture. Like a stream freed from a dam, it simply flows. This is the flowering of compassion, or karuna, and its companion, loving kindness, or metta. In Buddhism, these are not mere emotions or moral duties. They are understood as the inherent qualities of a mind that sees clearly, that sees the truth of interconnectedness and the shared nature of suffering and joy. When the illusion of solid separation softens, your well-being and the well-being of others are no longer separate projects. The happiness of a stranger becomes a cause for your quiet gladness, their pain becomes a call to your care, not as a burden, but as a natural resonance. Think of it as the sun. The sun does not decide, "I will shine on this flower but not that stone." It shines indiscriminately, because shining is its nature. When our awareness is cleared of the clouds of self-centered thought, of me and mine, what shines forth is a radiant, impartial care. This is the Bodhisattva ideal in Mahayana Buddhism, the one who vows to awaken not for oneself alone, but for the benefit of all beings, seeing that there is no true awakening that leaves anyone behind. Your practice of mindfulness and letting go is, perhaps without you even intending it, clearing the sky for this sun to shine. I saw a living example of this in a most unexpected place, a crowded city bus. An elderly man, confused and disoriented, had gotten on the wrong line. He was growing increasingly agitated, speaking loudly to himself, his fear palpable. The common reaction in such a tight space was a collective stiffening, people turning away, building walls with their newspapers and phones. But a young woman sitting near him did something different. She simply turned to him, made soft eye contact, and said gently, "It's okay. You're safe. Can you show me the paper in your hand?" Her voice held no pity, no panic, just a calm, grounded presence. She looked at his bus slip, calmly explained where he was and how to get where he needed to go. As she spoke, his agitation melted. Not just his, but the entire energy in that section of the bus changed. Walls came down. Others offered suggestions, a smile. For a few minutes, that bus was not a capsule of isolated strangers, but a temporary community, connected by a simple thread of care. The young woman wasn't a saint, she was simply someone whose own inner space was clear enough to allow compassion to flow without obstruction. She was being the sun, not by effort, but by nature. Let's deepen this understanding with an original story. In a vast, arid kingdom, there was a legendary well called the Sun Mirror. Its water was said to be always cool, clear, and sweet, but it was located in the royal gardens, inaccessible to the parched villages at the kingdom's edge. The keeper of the well was a man named Eris, whose duty was to protect and measure the water for the king's use alone. Eris took pride in his charge, in the perfect stillness of the water that reflected the sky like polished silver. He believed his worth was tied to this control. One year, a drought unlike any other struck. The village wells turned to dust. Desperate people began to gather outside the garden walls, their suffering a silent hum on the wind. Eris, from his post, could see the king's plants beginning to wilt, and he redoubled his efforts to conserve, covering the well, measuring each drop with anxiety. But one night, unable to sleep, he walked to the well. In the moonlight, he saw the famed perfect reflection. And for the first time, he saw his own face in it, gaunt with worry, superimposed over the starry sky. A realization struck him with the force of a physical blow, the water was never mine. The reflection is not the sky, his meticulous control was a fight against a truth as vast as the heavens. The next morning, he did not go to the palace. Instead, he took the heavy stone lid off the well. He began to carry buckets of water, not to the royal roses, but through the garden gate to the lines of waiting people. The king's guards were sent to stop him. But when they arrived, they saw something that gave them pause. Eris was not acting in rebellion or anger. He moved with a serene, purposeful grace. And as he poured water into a child's cupped hands, his face held a peace deeper than the well's stillness. He was not a keeper protecting a resource. He had become a channel for a bounty that belonged to no one. The guards, moved by the palpable rightness of the scene, did not arrest him. They joined him. The story spread. Soon, others from the palace and the city brought vessels. A system formed, not of hoarding, but of sharing. The well, to everyone's astonishment, did not run dry. It seemed the more it was given, the more it replenished. Eris had discovered the Buddhist teaching on dana, generosity, which states that true wealth increases through giving. By letting go of his identity as the separate, controlling keeper, he became a conduit for life itself, and in doing so, touched an inexhaustible source. His compassion was not a soft feeling, it was a revolutionary act of correct seeing, seeing the interconnectedness of all thirst. This story shows that compassion is the practical, embodied expression of wisdom. It is not a sentimental, feeling sorry for. It is the clear-seeing understanding that just as you wish to be free from suffering, so does every other being. And from that understanding, action flows naturally. Your practice tonight, as you rest, can be a simple one. With each out-breath, gently offer the wish, may all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be at peace. You are not sending out a magical force. You are aligning your own heart with its deepest, truest nature. You are practicing being the sun. Let's rest in this expansive, generous awareness. In the next part, we will explore how this open heart meets the inevitable changes and endings of life, the teachings on impermanence and the peace that can be found within them. As our hearts open in compassion, we inevitably encounter one of the most fundamental truths the Buddha pointed to, the reality of impermanence, or anicca. Everything that has a beginning has an ending. Every leaf that unfurls in spring will one day brown and fall. Every breath drawn in is released. Every relationship, every phase of life, every thought and feeling arises, lingers, and passes away. Our instinct is to resist this truth. We cling to what is pleasant, we rage against what is painful, and we ignore the neutral, all in a futile attempt to freeze the river of life. But the river flows on. Suffering, the Buddha taught, is not in the flowing itself, but in our desperate, aching resistance to it. Peace is found not in building a dam, but in learning to float with the current, to be the river itself. We see this everywhere, if we look with gentle eyes. The childhood home that felt so permanent, now occupied by another family. The vibrant health that was taken for granted, now requiring care. The project we poured our heart into, completed and fading into memory. We often meet these changes with a sense of loss, a grief that feels personal and profound. Yet, within the Buddha's teaching, there is a radical reframe: impermanence is not the thief of joy. It is the very condition that makes joy possible. If a flower never wilted, would we cherish its bloom so deeply? If a loved one's presence were guaranteed forever, would we treasure each moment with such poignant care? Impermanence is the canvas upon which the preciousness of life is painted. I learned this not in grand philosophy, but in a small, recurring ritual with my father. He had an old pocket watch, its brass case worn smooth. Every evening, he would take it out, wind it carefully, and listen to its steady, quiet tick before placing it on his bedside table. Keeping time, he'd say with a smile. When he passed, the watch came to me. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to wind it. Its silence felt like a monument to his absence. One evening, in a wave of grief, I picked it up. I wound it. The familiar, gentle tick filled the quiet room. In that moment, I didn't hear a reminder of loss. I heard the sound of a lifetime of careful, loving rituals. I heard the truth of anicca: his ritual had ended, but the love and attention that fueled it were still present, now in my own hands, in my own remembering. The watch wasn't a relic of something gone, it was a testament to something that was, beautifully and inevitably temporary. My grief softened into a bittersweet gratitude. The ticking was no longer about counting down. It was about being present for the count that is always happening, right now. Let's explore the embrace of impermanence through an original story. In a seaside village famed for its exquisite sand sculptures, there lived a master artist named Kalen. His creations were miracles of detail, soaring castles, intricate dragons, lifelike portraits, that drew crowds from miles around. Kalen's pride, however, was matched by a deep, private anguish. He hated the tide. Every day, his beautiful, hard-won work was slowly, inevitably washed away by the sea. He would rage at the waves, build barriers of driftwood, stay up all night making repairs. He was exhausted, his art born of struggle against the nature of his very medium. One season, a great storm washed away not just his sculptures, but the entire beachfront, reshaping the coastline. Kalen stood before the blank, smooth sand, utterly defeated. All his fighting had come to nothing. For days, he just sat and watched the sea. He saw how it took, but also how it gave, smoothing stones, leaving patterns of shells, breathing with a vast, rhythmic peace. A radical idea dawned on him. What if he collaborated with the tide, instead of fighting it? The next morning, he began a new piece. But this time, he sculpted not a fortress, but a series of graceful, spiraling channels leading from a central pool down to the water's edge. As he finished, the tide began to come in. The crowd murmured sadly, expecting another loss. But Kalen sat calmly on the dunes. The seawater filled the channels, turning them into glistening, silver pathways. It filled the central pool, creating a perfect, temporary mirror for the sky. For one glorious hour, the sculpture was not a static object, but a living, interactive dance between earth and sea. Then, as the tide receded, it slowly dissolved, the sand slipping back into smoothness, ready for the next day's creation. The crowd was silent, then broke into applause not for a thing made, but for a process witnessed. Kalen had discovered the heart of the Buddha's teaching. By accepting and incorporating impermanence into his art, he found a freedom and creativity he never had while resisting it. His masterpiece was no longer the sandcastle, but the wisdom of non-attachment to the castle. He learned to appreciate the beauty of the forming, the beauty of the enduring, and the beauty of the releasing, all as part of one sacred process. This story reflects the profound peace of upekkha, or equanimity, the balanced heart that remains undisturbed by the constant flow of gain and loss, praise and blame. It is the wisdom that allows us to engage fully with life, to love deeply, to create passionately, all while holding it all with open hands, knowing its temporary nature. This doesn't make our experiences shallow, it makes them sacred. Each moment becomes a unique, unrepeatable gift, precisely because it is passing. So how do we practice with this in daily life? We practice mindfulness of endings. When you finish a cup of tea, pause for one breath to acknowledge the end of that particular tea, that particular moment of warmth. When a conversation ends, let there be a heartbeat of silence to honor its completion before rushing to the next thing. When a feeling of joy arises, instead of clinging, whisper inwardly, "This, too." When a feeling of sorrow comes, offer it the same space. You are not becoming passive. You are becoming intimate with the true rhythm of existence, and in that intimacy, you find a stability that no single wave can destroy. You are learning to be the shore, witnessing the eternal coming and going of the sea. Let's rest now as that shore, stable and open. In the next part, we will bring all these threads together, exploring the nature of the self that witnesses this endless flow, the discovery of what we truly are. Having explored the flowing nature of all experience, thoughts, feelings, the world itself, we arrive at the most intimate inquiry of all: who, or what, is aware of all this? If everything we can perceive is temporary and changing, what is it that remains to witness the change? This question leads us to the heart of the Buddha's most subtle teaching, the nature of self, or anatta, often translated as not self. This is not a nihilistic claim that you don't exist. It is a profound and liberating pointer: you are not what you think you are. You are not the collection of your memories, your personality traits, your roles, or even your body. These are all passing phenomena, content in the field of awareness. You are the aware space itself in which all this content appears and dissolves. You are the knowing, not the known. We often live as if we are a figure in a painting, defined by the colors and brushstrokes of our life story. Buddhism invites us to realize we are the blank canvas upon which the painting is temporarily drawn. The canvas is not the image of a tree or a mountain, it simply allows any image to appear. It is untouched by the specific forms. Your essential nature is like that canvas, pure, aware, and unchanging in its capacity to know change. When you identify as the painting, you suffer when it fades. When you rest as the canvas, you are free. I glimpsed this in a moment of pure exhaustion years ago. After days of intense mental work, my mind was a cacophony of unfinished plans and self-criticism. I lay down, but the mental noise was unbearable. In a moment of surrender, I stopped trying to quiet it. Instead, I asked, to whom is this noise happening? I listened not to the thoughts, but for the listener. And in a gap between the rushing thoughts, there was, just listening. A vast, silent openness that was simply present. The thoughts were like birds flying through this open sky. They weren't my birds, they were just birds. The sky wasn't bothered. That silent, open listening was what I truly was. The exhausted person with all the problems was a story being told within that awareness. This is the simple, revolutionary shift the Buddha pointed to: cease identifying with the content of consciousness, and recognize yourself as consciousness itself. Let's examine this through an original story. In the heart of a silent forest was a clearing known as the Mirror Glade. In its center stood a vast, ancient pool of perfectly still water. It was said that if you looked into it, you wouldn't see your own reflection, but your true face. Many came seeking this vision. A proud knight came, clad in shining armor. He peered in and saw only his magnificent armor reflected. "This is my true face, strong and glorious," he declared, and left unchanged. A grieving widow came. She looked in and saw only her tears distorting the surface. "This is my true face, sorrow itself," she wept, and left in deeper pain. Finally, a quiet wanderer with no title or story arrived. She sat by the pool for days, not seeking, just resting. She watched clouds pass over it, leaves fall into it, birds skim its surface. She saw it reflect the blue sky, the dark night, the blazing stars. One morning, in perfect calm, she simply gazed. She saw the reflections of the surrounding trees, the sky, a passing deer. But she did not see a separate her anywhere. She was looking from awareness, not for an object within it. In that moment, she realized, the pool was not defined by any single reflection. Its true nature was to be clear, still, and capable of reflecting the entire world without holding on to any of it. She was the pool. Her true face was not an image, it was the reflective, boundless clarity itself. She walked from the glade not with a new identity, but with the peaceful understanding that she had no fixed face to find. She was free to experience the world without being trapped by any single experience. This is the realization of anatta. The self is not a solid thing to be found, but an ongoing, open process of aware presence. This understanding dismantles the engine of so much suffering, personalization. When a painful thought arises, instead of, I am a sad person, it becomes, sadness is arising. When a failure occurs, instead of, I am a failure, it becomes, this particular action did not yield the desired result. This creates a space of freedom around experience. You can care for the sadness, learn from the failure, without becoming them. You are the sky, holding the weather. The Buddha's path is about cultivating this sky-like mind, a mind that is vast, accommodating, and fundamentally at peace regardless of the mental climate. So, how do we rest in this? The practice is deceptively simple. Notice what is aware. Right now, you are hearing these words. Can you feel the space in which the sound happens? You are feeling the weight of your body. Can you sense the awareness that knows this feeling? Don't try to picture it or think about it. Simply turn attention back onto the subject, the knowing presence itself. Each time you get lost in a thought, the content, gently return to the simple fact of being aware. This is not a strenuous focusing. It is a relaxing back into what you already are. It is like a wave settling back into the ocean, realizing it was never separate. This awareness you are discovering is not yours, in a personal sense. It is impersonal, universal consciousness. The same awareness that looks out from your eyes is what looked out from the Buddha's eyes. It is what hears through the wanderer, knows through the scholar, loves through the child. Personalities and stories differ infinitely, but the basic luminous quality of knowing is the same. Resting here, the barriers between me and you begin to soften. Compassion is no longer something you extend from your separate self to another, it is the natural quality of this shared awareness recognizing itself everywhere. Let this be a gentle resting place. In the next part, we will explore how this realization of our true nature meets and transforms our everyday life, bringing a sense of sacredness to the simplest of acts. And so we arrive here, together, at the end of our spoken journey and the true beginning of your silent one. We have traveled through stories of weavers and watchmakers, pools and gardens, through the landscapes of fear, forgiveness, impermanence, and the vast, open sky of awareness itself. We have seen that the Buddha's wisdom is not a distant philosophy, but a living truth woven into the very fabric of your present experience. It is the recognition that peace is not a reward for a journey completed, but the very ground upon which you already stand. You are not a seeker on a path. You are the path itself, walking itself home. Now, let us bring all of this understanding into a single, breath-held moment. Right here, as you listen, there is hearing. Beneath the hearing, there is awareness. This awareness is not busy. It is not trying to understand these words or remember the stories. It is simply present, like a mirror effortlessly reflecting the room. This mirror-like quality of mind is your original nature. What the Zen masters call your original face before you were born. It is untouched by any of the experiences it reflects. Your task, if there is one, is simply to cease turning away from it. To stop privileging the reflections, the thoughts, the plans, the memories, over the pristine mirror that holds them all. In this recognition, a great simplification occurs. Life ceases to be a problem to be solved and becomes a mystery to be lived. The sacred is not found in special rituals or faraway temples, it is hidden in plain sight, in the next thing your hand does, the next sensation your body feels, the next sound that reaches your ear. The Japanese poet and Zen practitioner Izumi Shikibu captured this perfectly when she wrote, "Although the wind blows terribly here, the moonlight also leaks between the roof plants of this ruined house." Your life may contain terrible winds, worries, pains, losses. But always, always, the moonlight of aware presence leaks through. Your practice is to notice the moonlight. I will leave you with one final, original story, a parable for this integration. In a bustling port city, there was a famous mapmaker named Silas. His maps were works of art, detailing not just coastlines and roads, but the names of every shop, the types of trees in every park, the best benches for watching sunsets. People relied on his maps to navigate the complex city. Silas, however, never left his high tower workshop. He collected reports from travelers, piecing the world together secondhand. He knew everything about the city, but he had not felt its rain on his skin, smelled its bakeries at dawn, or gotten lost in its unnamed alleyways. He was knowledgeable but deeply lonely, a prisoner of representation. One day, a great fire swept through the city, destroying countless buildings, including Silas's tower. All his maps, his life's work, were ash. He stood in the sooty street, utterly bereft. A child approached, her face smudged, and took his hand. "Mister," she said, "I'm lost. Can you help me find the way to the river?" Silas opened his mouth to say he could not, that his maps were gone. But he looked at her worried face and simply said, "I don't know the way either. But we can find it together." Hand in hand, they walked. With no map to consult, Silas was forced to use his senses. He felt the gentle downhill slope under his feet. He heard the distant cry of gulls. He noticed the way the air grew cooler and carried a damp, green scent. He was not following a line on paper, he was following the direct intelligence of life itself. When they finally reached the river, seeing its wide, healing flow, the child laughed with joy. And Silas, for the first time, felt truly found. He had traded the map for the territory. He realized his true work was not to chart the city, but to be the city. To walk it, feel it, be present with its lost children and its flowing waters. This is the invitation of Monk's Temple, and of the Buddha's enduring wisdom. Your mind has been a magnificent mapmaker, drawing intricate charts of your past, your future, your identity. But the map is not the territory. The word water is not a drink. Tonight, the maps can rest. You do not need to navigate anymore. You are already here. The territory is this breath. The territory is this feeling of being cradled by gravity. The territory is the silent awareness reading these words. The Tibetan teachers have a blessing, and I offer it to you now as we close: rest in natural great peace. This exhausted mind, beaten helpless by karma and neurotic thought, like the relentless fury of the pounding waves in the infinite ocean of samsara. Rest in natural great peace. You can rest now. The waves of thought may still rise and fall, but you have remembered you are the ocean, deep, still, and boundless. Nothing to fix. Nothing to find. Nothing to become. Simply this. Simply here. Simply aware. Thank you for sharing this sacred space. May the peace you have touched here accompany you, not as a memory, but as your ever-present nature. Sleep deeply, and know you are home.